Hi everyone. So in this particular video, we will see 10 DevOps interview questions and that based on the AWS cloud only. Okay. So whenever you appear in the interview, you are being asked, like if you are appearing for the DevOps engineer or senior DevOps engineer, you are asked for a certain number of questions and from different technology, correct? So we will specifically talk about AWS cloud here. So we will cover these 10 to 11 questions today. So we will talk about NACL versus security group. We will talk about how to access your S3 service with the help of EC2 using three different way, using IAM role, using VPC endpoint, and other options. We will talk about trust relationship and policy, cross account S3 access, VPC endpoint, and API gateway. How can you connect your EC2 or to S3 without internet? That is using VPC endpoint. How to handle secret, what are the types of a storage account in AWS S3, and familiar, like you familiar with lifecycle management in S3 buckets or not? That question. And what are the difference between load balancers, network load balancer, application load balancer, and auto scaling group? So we will see these 10 to 11 questions and their answer. So let's practice on that. So I am using I'm taking the help of ChatGPT for quick revision. Correct. So let's come with the first question. So what is the difference between NACL and security group? Correct. So as you can see, the NACL full form is Network Access Control List, and the security group. Both are the tools for managing network security, but serve different purpose within AWS networking. Correct. So what is the layer of operation? So security group operate at instance level, that is on EC2 machine, while NACL works at subnet level. That's the major difference. We're talking about the state. Security group is the stateful, like whatever you allow in inbound rule, it will remember that it has to allow that as well. If you see, if an inbound rule allows traffic on port 80, the response will automatically be allowed without an outbound rule, correct? While NSCL is stateless. That means if you allow any traffic on port 30, you will have to explicitly tell this NSCL that you have to allow this as well. So a security group is stateful, NSCL is stateless, correct? What is rules and scope? What's about the rule and scope? Security groups are analyzed at all at one, correct? So it's on the instance level, focusing on specific protocols and dot, and how many the number of rules like you will be mentioning in the security group, all will be analyzed at once. You can see it here. You can specify allow rules. Multiple security group can be associated with a single instance, allowing more complex rule configuration. Here in the NACL, rules are applied in the order like 101, 103, 2, and on those, and that too on subnet level, correct? Number of rules, security group goes with only allow option, while in the NACL, we can define both allow and deny rules, correct? Order of evaluation, security groups are evaluated, all rules are evaluated together. There is no ordering, while in the NSCL, rules are evaluated in order. That is 101, 102. So in the order you specify the NSCL rules, it is evaluated in the order. Correct. So what is the use case? Security group ideal for managing access at the instance level, and it serves the protocol HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH kind of thing. While NSCL better suited for additional layer of security at subnet level. Practical example, if you want for the security like rule, you want to restrict any kind of permission on EC2, you can go with the security group. While you want to restrict any kind of and want to apply any certain kind of rules on the subnet level, you can go with the NACL rules. Okay. Coming to the next second question, how can you access S3 using EC2? Correct. There are different ways to connect your S3 service with the help of EC2. First one is with the IAM role. So if when you will be launching the EC2 instance, you will be getting into the settings of that, and in the settings you can go for the, like you can see in the EC2 dashboard, you will get into the action security and then modify IAM role. In the modify IAM role, you will see the option to attach one IAM role. So you will go to the IAM console, you will create one IAM role, and then IAM in the IAM role you will attach policy of Amazon S3 read only access. So this IAM role, the role you will be creating here, that will have the permission of S3 read only access. And with the help of this IAM role and policy, EC2 will be able to access the your S3 service, correct? Then there is a second option. How can you connect your S3 using the EC2 instance with the help of AWS CLI, correct? So S3 definitely directly CLI SDK you can use you can install that AWS CLI and you can directly run your S3 commands on that. Then there is a third option of the VPC endpoint, correct? So even without having internet or like you won't be using internet gateway here. The third option is VPC endpoint, correct? So with the help of a VPC endpoint, you will get into the VPC dashboard. You will create one endpoint that will be VPC endpoint here. And while creating the endpoint, you will be selecting the type as gateway. So there are two options, gateway and interface. You will be selecting the gateway endpoint and you will choose the option of S3 service, correct? In which region your S3 bucket is deployed. So you will be selecting that S3 service and you will be selecting the private route table. And with the help of this PPC endpoint, you will be able to access your EC2 instance. You'll be able to access S3 service with the help of EC2 instance, correct? So that is the third option. Okay. Coming to the third question, explain the difference between trust relationship and policy. Now, here we are talking about the IAM service of the AWS. So what is the trust relationship? A trust relationship defines who is allowed to assume an IAM role or access resource based on trust policy. So in trust policy, we can mention ARN of a service, correct? I want my EC2 to access S3, correct? So in trust relationship, I can mention that EC2 should assume the role for S3, correct? So that kind of thing I can do. What is the purpose? To specify the trusted entities that can assume or use a role, correct? So EC2 can use the role and it can access the S3. So in trust relationship, I can mention that ec2.amazonaws.com can access S3, correct? Granting an EC2 instance permission to assume a role or allowing a Lambda function to assume a specific IAM role. That's the purpose, correct? How it works? Like here you can see this in that this trust policy. There are parameters, effect, principle, action, and condition. So in effect, we call it as allow. In the principle, we are mentioning that who can assume the role. So it's the EC2 Amazon AWS.com that can assume the role. For which it will like in the policy we are giving the policy of S3, so EC2 will be able to assume the role and it can access the S3. It's assume role, correct? In the action, it's assume role. So that's the function of trust policy. Sorry, trust relationship. And then what is the IAM policy? It defines what permission are granted to IAM user, group, or role. Policy define action and resources and control access. What's the purpose? To control the action a user, group, or role is allowed or denied to perform a specific resource on a specific resource. How it is written? So here also it's effect, action, and resource. So what on which resource we are giving the permission? We are giving the permission of S3, my bucket, and whoever is there. It's a star, correct? So anyone can access. And what are all operations it can perform? S3 a star, correct? So it can get the object, it can delete the object, it can fetch the object, it can rename if there is a that thing, or it can delete bucket, create bucket. All kind of permissions are allowed through the star. So that's the policy, correct? So if you see the difference here, purpose specify who can assume a role or access a resource. In the IAM policy, what actions are allowed in resource used by roles. Trust relationship are always used by roles, and IAM policy can be used by user, groups, and roles, anyone. What is defined? Trust policy. Defined in trust policy, part of the IAM role, IAM policy documents. It is defined. Actions, STS assume role, and here in the actions, we mark it as S3 get object, delete object, or AC to start instance, all those kind of actions we mentioned, correct? Coming to the next question, how to do cross account S3 access, correct? So for that, we will have to set up the bucket policy in account A. Like there are two accounts, account A and account B. We want to access data from account B to account A, correct? So set up the bucket policy in account A, bucket owner. Go to S3 console and go to permission bucket policy. In the bucket policy, you will have to create your policy like this. And in the permission, like in the principal section in the AWS, you will have to mention the ARN of the account B ID role and the role user, correct? You will be creating a role as well there, correct? So like if you can see in account A, update the S3 bucket policy to grant permission to the IAM user or role in account B. So you will be creating a policy like this. In the action, you will be mentioning S3 get object and list bucket. So that kind of permission, or if you want to give the permission of delete bucket and delete object, those kind of permission, you can mention here, correct? Then create a IAM role in account B from where you want to access, correct? So there you will get into that and you will create one trust policy. And they, like as we talked about the trust policy earlier, that who can assume the role, correct? So you can see here as well. So account A can access from the S3, account A can access as account B S3 object, S3 bucket, correct? So here we will be passing the ARN of the account A, correct? If you can see, it's STS assume role. So with the help of this, then assume the role and access S3 account B. Then you can create this AWS STS assume role. For example, it's the example, correct? You can see that. And you can run this command AWS S3 to ls. It will list down your all the objects which are in the bucket, correct? So this way we can have the cross account S3 access, correct? We were talking about this. And then coming to the next question, what is the VPC endpoint? So VPC endpoint is used for accessing your private resources which are within the VPC. And with the help of this VPC endpoint, you can access the resources outside the VPC privately without having the access of your internet and something. So if you see the definition, VPC endpoint is allow you to create a private connection between your VPC, virtual private net cloud, and supported AWS services, correct? So just like we talked about the EC2 and S3 here, how can we connect our S3 with the help of EC2, correct? That was the third option. Ensure EC2 instance network connectivity with the S3. If you see S3 VPC endpoint to access S3 directly without needing an internet, that was the concept here. So we are talking about the similar thing here. So what are the types of VPC endpoint? It's the interface endpoint and the gateway endpoint. To access our S3, we were using gateway endpoint. I talked about that. So a gateway endpoint acts as a gateway in your route table that routes traffic to a specific AWS service, namely Amazon S3 or DynamoDB, correct? So benefits of what is the benefit of VPC endpoint? It enhances the security. Traffic between your VPC and AWS service does not leave the Amazon network. It's within the Amazon network only. And this is especially important when working in regulated environments. It reduces the latency and cost, avoids the need for net gateway and internet gateway. That means reducing the cost and legacy, latency as well. Simplified network architecture enables private access without the need to continue VPN, configure VPN or direct connect, correct? How can you create this VPC endpoint? Get into the your VPC console, you will see the endpoint option. Then you select the service while creating the endpoint, and then you can create configure your VPC and subnets. Right? You can see in the route table, you will have to select your private route table where your service is deployed, like EC2, and then in the service you will be selecting the S3 as a service. And then you will be with the help of IAM role and policy, which we will attach your with your EC2 instance, you will be able to access your S3 bucket, correct? As we talked earlier as well. What are the types of storage account in AWS S3? And that's our next question. So AWS offers you various storage classes. So let's get into the types of storage classes only. So S3 standard is one of the type. Then a second type is S3 standard IA, that is infrequent access. Those kind of objects which are very less frequently accessed for data that is accessed less frequently, but it still requires rapid access when needed, correct? So second storage class is S3 standard IA, then S3 one zone IA, then S3 intelligent tiering, and then S3 Glacier for archival storage of data that is rarely accessed but needs long-term retention. And then there is S3 Glacier Deep Archive, the lowest cost storage option for data that is rarely accessed and retained for long periods, like 1 year or 2 years. So that kind of for that kind of period, you can use this S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Then there is S3 Outpost. So these are the different storage class of S3. You can see the storage class and the use case here. Frequently accessed data, dynamic website application needing low latency, then infrequently accessed data with rapid access, then Glacier Deep Archive for archival data, and the local data storage or for on-premise data use case, that is S3 Outpost storage class is used for that particular purpose. Okay. Coming to the next question. Are you familiar with lifecycle management in S3 bucket, and how do you set up lifecycle policy? So lifecycle policy is used for transferring your data from one storage class to another storage class, correct? Just suppose that you have a production database and you want to move your log file, uh, which are older than 1 month, correct, into the archival one. So you will be sending your data and log files from S3 Exchanger to S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So it will save your cost, correct? So let's come here. So what is the lifecycle management? Helps you manage object storage cost by automatically transitioning object between different storage class. That's the definition. or expiring them based on a specific criteria, correct? You can delete the object as well from one storage class to another, sending it from one storage class to another storage class. Define when to transition objects. Lifecycle, in the lifecycle rule, you can define that after how many days you can send your data from one storage class to different storage class, correct? Or expire them. What are the actions? Transition actions or expiration actions. So this type of two kind of actions we can perform. Either we can move objects to a different storage class based on the number of days, or we can permanently delete that. So these are the two options. And step two, set up an S3 lifecycle policy. Get into the S3 console, get into the management tab, and then you will create a new lifecycle rule. In the rule, you will be mentioning rule ID, and then you will be mentioning the scope. And then in the add lifecycle actions, you can move that different two different storage class from then like the source and destination, from which storage class and to where it will move to. Like you can move from a standard IA to S3 Glacier and those kind of things. Correct? You can mention that. And from the JSON body, you can use the help of this. Like on J30, it will move to a standard IA. Then it will, after the 90 days, it will move to Glacier. And after 1 year, 365 days, it will expire. So this is how you can you have the use of lifecycle policy. Correct. With the help of this, you can move your data from one storage class to another storage class. What are the difference between load balancers and why do we need them according to our needs? So here it's showing the four kind of load balancer, but generally we talk about this AWS and the application load balancer and network load balancer. So I will directly come there. Explain application load balancer versus network load balancer. Correct. So let's come to the comparison part first. So application layer operates on layer 7, while network load balancer operates on layer 4. By protocol, it works on HTTP, HTTPS, WebSocket, gRPC, while network load balancer works on TCP, UDP, TLS. Routing, it's a path-based routing. Application load balancer support path-based routing, host-based routing, header-based, while network load balancer supports on IP-based. Latency, it's moderate but higher than NLB, while network load balancer works on the network, so there is a low latency, very low latency, correct? It's a highly perform, it gives high performance. Preserved in X forwarded forwarded, native client IP preservation, client IP can, talking about health checks are applicable on application level, HTTP or HTTPS status. And for the network load balancer, it's on the transport level, that is our TCP layer. SSL termination happens on application load balancer. That means your HTTP and HTTPS security kind of thing, like whatever certificate you applied to do the SSL termination. So that will applicable on the application load balancer on layer 7, while it's also applicable on network load balancer, but on layer 4, correct? Best for web applications, API, and microservices, while network load balancer is best for high performance TCP UDP real-time applications, real-time gaming application, or satellite launching kind of thing. There you can use the network load balancer, correct? And have you worked with auto scaling group? So yes. So for that, like auto scaling group is used for automatically adjust the number of EC2 instances in response to demand, optimizing cost and ensuring availability. Correct. What are the key parameters to consider while launching or creating ASG? Launch configuration or launch template. You will have to create a template where you can mention your AMI ID, that is in, from which operating system your EC2 instance will be launched, EC2 instance type, the key peer, security group, and block storage. Then you will be mentioning IAM role and policy also in the launch template. With the help of that, it will be it will be helpful for accessing different AWS services. Then you can mention mean, max, and desired capacity, that how many number of EC2 instances should be minimum, how many number of instances should be the maximum one, and the desired one, how many number of EC2 instances you want, which should be the desired one, the target one to serve your traffic, correct? Then there are a different scaling policy based on the which this ASG will do the scaling of the EC2 instances. There are three: target tracking scaling, step scaling, and scheduled scaling, correct? So it step scaling will add or remove instance in a step based on alarm or metrics. So if it your there is an alarm which will be triggered and it requires more EC2 instances, it will increase the number of EC2 instances. And once it is done, so if your alert is okay, so it will again reduce it, add or remove instance, correct? Here it adjusts instance and count to meet a target metric and the target. So there are options you will see on the console. There are based on the CloudWatch events, CPU utilization, the number of requests which are coming to the EC2 instances. So there are multiple options based on which like CPU utilization, memory utilization, number of requests. So with the help of that, you can configure your auto-scaling group to launch a new EC2 instance. Then you can launch your ASG in different availability zone. Correct, you can have your EC2 instance launch in different availability zone. For that, you will have to give the multiple availability zone option in your ASG as well. So spread instance across multiple availability zone. Then you will have to select for the load balancer. You can attach elastic load balancer like ALB, NLB, or CLB to distribute traffic. Then what is the cooldown period? So in the edge, there is a cooldown period. That means a time period after a scaling activity during which further scaling actions are temporarily suspended. So once your scaling has been done, it will take a time in between that is called as cooldown period where scaling will not be happening and scaling will not happen. So it will take a bit of time, correct? Then lifecycle hooks are there. Instance refresh option is there. Helps in updating instance within an ASG gradually by setting a policy that replace older instances, correct? So yeah. So other than that, you can do the metric collection and notification with the help of auto-scaling group metrics. It enables monitoring include metrics like group read capacity, in service instance, and pending instances. So yeah, these are the 10 questions which are being asked in DevOps interview question from the AWS perspective. So that's it for today. We will come in the second part of this video with 10 more questions. So thank you till the time. Bye bye.